welcome to the SSI Orbit podcast, a forum for conversations that explore the ever-growing ecosystems of self-sovereign identity. And I'm your host, Mathieu Claude. Now this week's episode is a bit of a different one, as I had the pleasure this week of moderating a fireside chat style discussion at an Indicio community event. And the theme for the event was Wallet Mania. So alongside myself, I had the pleasure of chatting with quite a few panelists, including Mike VC from ID Ramp, Dev Barrel from Global ID, Adrian Dork from Lissy, RJ Reeser from Liquid Avatar, and Michael Boyd from Trinsic. Now, there's a growing number of digital wallets that can collect and hold verifiable credentials that are gaining traction across the world. So that's why this discussion about wallets made so much sense right now. And so this discussion starts off with an introduction to self-sovereign identity and an introduction to digital wallets and how digital wallets play a big role inside of SSI. We then move to talk about building wallets and just talking about what criteria should be taken into consideration when building wallets. Stuff from a privacy, portability, security perspective, but also from a user experience perspective. Throughout the conversation, we also talk about use cases for wallets and the experience of some of the panelists here deploying these use cases using digital wallets. We also, throughout the conversation, address some questions that were coming from the attendees in the Zoom chat. So thank you for listening to this podcast today. The numbers of listeners are growing, which is phenomenal and keeps me excited to keep doing more of these. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And without any further ado, here is the panel discussion on Wallet Mania. Enjoy.
Welcome to Indicio Identity Community Meeting for September. We are very excited today. Our topic is Wallet Mania. I think everyone cannot wait to hear from these amazing speakers today. We have moderator from Northern Block, Matthew Graudy. He is amazing speaker. I met in different, his meetup, his event a few years ago, and I was very inspired, and he agreed to be moderating today, and I would like to pass my mic to Matthew.
Great, thank you, Maya. Thanks for the introduction and for the panelists that are on here today. I think I could echo all of our thoughts that we're very happy to be here today and be speaking about wallets in general. And I think Maya, you set the bar high for us today. So hopefully we could live up to everyone's expectations here. So I think it's no secret, and everyone here is quite familiar at a general level with wallets, or at least seeing that wallets are taking off. And there's technology solution providers that are putting wallet solutions in markets. There's operating system providers like your Apples and the Googles of the world that have wallets. There's different types of wallets that are out there. There's organizational wallets, there's embedded wallets, there's different standards that get used with these wallets. And so we're going to be talking about all this today with our wonderful panelists. And so like the presentation objective here that we all kind of share as the group here today is we're not trying to make it too technical. I think we're really trying to focus from an adoption standpoint, which really should be the focus of a lot of these discussions. And so over the conversation today, we're just starting. It's 5 minutes past the hour. We're going to go until the end of the hour. If there are any questions that anyone here has throughout the presentation, please use the chat functionality in Zoom. And my job as moderator here I'll try as much as I can to incorporate any questions during the presentation into the conversation as they are relevant. And if not, we will be setting aside some time towards the end of the hour based on the amount of questions to respond to Q&A. And so please use the chat function in Zoom for any questions. So we're going to start the presentation off with a bit of an introduction to self-sovereign identity and wallets. Throughout the conversation, we're looking to move more towards kind of what does it take to build wallets, or how do you build wallets? How should things like user experience be taken into consideration when building wallets? And we're looking to finish the conversation by just discussing a little more in regard to use cases that are being worked on by some of the folks here, or use cases that are promising or exciting to the group here today. And so just to start off with introductions, so as Maya introduced me, my name is Mathieu Glaude. I'm the CEO of Northern Block. Northern Block is a technology solution provider in the self-sovereign identity space. Maybe I'll throw it to each one of the speakers. Mike, if you just want to give a brief introduction on yourself, and then if you could throw it to one of the next panelists and so on until it finds its way back to me, that'd be good.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I know we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about today. I'm Mike VC, CEO of IDRamp. IDRamp is focused on really bridging traditional identity into self-sovereign identity and all things there in between. So we're doing a lot of work in the space. Really thrilled to be here and excited to have a great discussion today. I'll pass it over to Dev.
Hey, everybody. So I'm a product owner and a software architect over at Global ID. I'm subbing in for Mania, our CTO today. Global ID is not just focused on identity as while we have identity as our core service offering, our platform kind of focuses on a number of umbrella offerings such as messaging, such as groups functionality, wallet, payment providing. So like a number of different umbrella services that we can tie into identity together. And I'll toss it over to Adrian.
Hello, I'm Adrian Dirk from the Main Incubator. We're the research and development unit of the Commerce Bank. And within the Main Incubator, we have the LISI project where we develop solutions for self-sovereign identity management. And there I'm doing business development as well as the communication topics, as well as an ID union where I also lead the communication. And some of you might also know me as SSI ambassador, which I have a channel on and try to get educational content around and be a voice of the community. And I would like to pass it on to RJ Reiser.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is RJ Reiser. I run our business development at Liquid Avatar. And we kind of started a number of years ago around traditional identity type solutions and have now moved over to self-sovereign identity and providing a wallet. And so we have quite a few case studies that we've been working on that we'll be sharing with you today. Back to Matthew. No, to Michael. I'm sorry.
Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Boyd. I'm the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Trinsic. Trinsic is a developer platform and toolkit to issue and verify credentials. We have developer SDKs in all the major programming frameworks, and we're really excited to be here. We've thought a lot about the wallet UX, specifically as it pertains to individuals using a mobile phone.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And again, welcome to everyone that's on this call today. We're happy to have you here with all of us. And so just as a starter, so the first section I mentioned, we want to kind of give a little brief introduction on wallets and how wallets fit into self-sovereign identity. I'm going to get to you, Adrian, in a minute for a little bit of a brief overview on wallets, but just as a starter, Mike, if I could throw it to you and just kind of give us a little bit of an overview in understanding some of the differences between what kind of a federated model looks like and what a self-sovereign identity model looks like, just to give a bit of framework to kind of the rest of the discussion here.
Sure. Yeah, it's an important concept to understand. We find a lot of people coming into the space we don't think a lot about it, right? We don't think a lot about what a self-sovereign identity is versus a generated identity that we are kind of maybe stewards of, but not really in control of. And so it's very important to understand that where I think all of us panelists would agree, we're seeing more of a migration into user-held credentials based on things that are important to us, and things that mean and have value to us individually. And those transcend different identity silos that exist for us today through either other big tech providers, my Apple ID, my Google ID, or my bank, or all of these things that are generated on my behalf and given to me in the form of passwords, typically, that I bring back. This is really a migration away from that centralized data silo environment that we live in today, and really providing the ability for us to take a little more ownership in that data and maintain things that are important to us that we can use. And so all of us on this panel really are committed to the ability to use that technology, allow that technology to be developed and held by individuals and carried interoperably throughout our communities to do a variety of different things that I'm sure we'll talk about today. So very important to understand the difference between an identity that I am in control of and that is portable and moves with me versus an identity that is assigned to me that can be revoked or taken away at any time. That's really the biggest I think misconception we have, or the biggest education point when we see new people coming into the space.
Thank you. So I guess with people in control of their identities and self-sovereign identity really fitting within user-centric digital identity, and I don't think we necessarily want to go too deep into the whole concept of identity, because that's we go down a whole rabbit hole there. But in terms of just what is the core here, and what we're talking about here today is talking about wallets being one of those core infrastructure pieces that enable people to partake in this user-centric and data ownership and control of their own credentials. I think if we look at wallets, but we look at wallets maybe from a perspective of some of the functions that happen when we're having interactions and relationships with people. And I know, Adrian, when we talk about some of the different elements in self-sovereign identity models, whether they're establishing secure communication channels, whether they're credential exchange, do you mind giving a bit of an overview of what are some of the different functions that we see inside of self-sovereign identity, and kind of where does the wallet play into all of these? It might be interesting to look at it more from the lens of how it works inside of these different types of interactions.
Yeah, so basically when we talk about a wallet, we talk in a physical world, right? We have a lot of cards, right? These are my cards from, for example, my wallet. And our task is now to put these cards into a digital wallet. So just transferring like the physical one, which we carry around with us, into the digital world. And for now, it works as an app on the phone. And there we can store these kind of different credentials and manage them, receive them, and present them. And obviously, we have then these kind of credentials as one part, but also the connections, our contacts, which we interact with. And these two aspects are the really crucial building blocks. And now, obviously, from a user perspective flow of a use case, it is that we most of the time get to know somebody, and that we interact or start to have an interaction with and establish a communication channel. And with this communication channel, we can exchange information. So it could be that we get asked first as a user to provide certain information, which we already have, or that the company or institutions issue us, the user, a certain credential. This could be a driver license or any other card which you could think about. So every time when we want to access a use case and get to do something, which in the digital world, so accessing digital services, then it's crucial that we have this information within our wallet and then be able to present this information to the third party, which is requesting it in order to access this digital service. And within the wallet, it's obviously also very important that we have the transparency and the control as a user to see, okay, who do I interact with? Can I trust the third party? And which interactions maybe I did in the past. So to have a protocol of past interactions, and that's all the things which I want to do. Thus, it provides a graphical user interface to subtract the highly technical aspects of it, and only like to take the user by the hand and provide them with a good user flow that actually also my mother, for example, could use it without further knowledge of actually what we're building here and the nitty-gritty of it. So that's the essence of the wallets, what we're building.
Awesome. Thank you, Adrian. I'll throw this one to Michael, and Dev, feel free to chime in. And by the way, anyone here, feel free to chime in if you want to add to this. It's good for the discussion. But before moving on to actually building wallets, Michael and or Dev, one of you could kind of take this first and the other could chime in. But what are the different types of wallets that are out there today? Like, how do you differentiate them? How does an organization deal with a wallet? And I know you both build wallets and we have seen use cases around here, but how does a wallet differ from an organizational perspective to a person perspective to an IoT perspective? And Adrian mentioned that wallets are mostly mobile today. Where do you see kind of different operating systems or different channels to be used for wallets as we move forward?
Michael, do you want to go first?
Sure. So there's a lot of different kind of mental frameworks that we can use when we think about a wallet. In the past, we talked a lot about agents as well, which was kind of this idea of a digital representation for an individual or some sort of entity. And I think as we've gone on in the space, specifically when we talk about an individual, we think of the interaction that they need to do either in person or online. And normally that is on like a mobile device, right? And kind of traditionally, we've had a lot of wallets built with all of the data stored on the device itself. So the credentials are issued directly to that edge device and then are presented either in person, kind of through a peer-to-peer interaction, or maybe online where there's some sort of exchange request that goes to that device itself. As we get into more of like an organizational or an IoT use case, we see a lot of wallets that maybe are more custodial in nature. For an IoT device, it may be the case that, if my front door needs to, or some sort of like IoT device needs to either issue or present credentials, I'm probably going to have some sort of Raspberry Pi or some sort of like cloud server that IoT device uses as its wallet. Similarly, on a much broader level to kind of an enterprise or an organization, we're seeing a lot of interest in organizations using Trinsic's platform to host their wallets, or host their wallet, so they don't have to worry about kind of all of the data management that goes on. So, you have different legal contracts as well that bind our relationships to organizations and us as individuals. And I think towards the future, we're seeing a lot of interesting work getting done in decentralized data stores, or we've called them confidential data vaults or identity hubs, where you can actually have more of a synchronized wallet experience across all of the different platforms, maybe mobile and desktop, and even some sort of cloud wallet, where all the credentials that you own can be distributed amongst all these devices without necessarily needing to host them on a specific company's server, which we can get more into if you want to get more technical about this. But I'd love to hear what Dev has to say about it.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to add on to about the custodial wallet stuff that very much excites me when we talk about self-sovereign identity is migration. Migration. The ability to standardize the concept of what a wallet is, so you can actually move it you can have a great user experience where whether it's an organization or a user might start out with a custodial wallet and later on migrate it to a device that they control fully. And then later on, maybe they have multiple devices that they control and they want to move the wallet between them. And that's one of the interesting things that I love about the way we're doing standardization across the Aries protocols and the Aries wallet system ecosystem is the ability to do things like that. And I think that's going to be one of the key cornerstones of how to make that a great user experience, that it doesn't matter where we are, we can migrate the wallets from one to another.
Mike or RJ, if we look at this kind of continuing the thinking here that's coming from Dev and Michael and kind of different types of wallets from a use case perspective, and I know both of you work on interesting respective use cases. How do you see these different types of wallets being deployed and used?
So I want to just take a step back just for a second. For us, it's a matter of control, right? Now with blockchain, you can start to create an environment where the individual controls their PII, their identity. And you can see that governments are starting to realize the power of these wallets that are based on blockchain, with the press release that Ontario government just had that's focused on leveraging open standards to be able to provide SSI. And real simply, it just moves the control to the individual. If you look at GDPR or the CCPA for California, all these new government regulations are focused on empowering the user to manage and control their identity, from whether it's a government issued identity or whether it's login and password credentials or Internet of Things. Now, however the wallet's set up, there's a couple different formats, and it really depends on your scenario or what you're trying to accomplish. So, do I think wallets are going to be on web-based, where they're on my web computer? There isn't any right now. If you look at crypto, there's not very many. They're all mobile-based, right? So the reason why they're mobile-based is just practicality. I can't carry my computer to get entry into my office building or entry into a venue, but I can carry my device, my phone. So as a result, I think the first use cases are all going to be centered on a mobile device. Now, it could be an edge wallet where it sits on my wallet, and if I lose, or sits on my phone, if I lose my phone, I lost my credentials. I have to go through the process of reissuing it. Perhaps, and it's going to be choice for the user. Does the user want to have that edge functionality on their wallet, where if they lose their wallet, they're in a bad spot? Or do they want a cloud-based wallet where I can log in from any of my devices, and through biometrics is one example, I can get to those credentials and use them. So that gets to the situation where I have control of my wallet, but it's an added technology. So maybe there's additional fees to do that. But the nice thing is, based on these open standards, the individuals can choose what level or what type of wallet and what level of security that they like to have. Like, for example, with my house, when I lock up my house, I don't have cameras, but if I want to have cameras, I can put cameras in. It's the same thing with all of these wallets. You can add different levels of security, and it all builds to an open standard. And so I think that our biggest challenger, I was fortunate enough to be on a call with a couple Canadian senators, and their whole attitude is, we have to show the users the use case that provides value. Talking about technology and the level of the wallet, I don't think a user is going to care about the wallet. We're going to care because we can offer a solution based on what security levels or functionality that they need. But as a group here, working towards these open standards, we have to be able to show users that are going to adopt these wallets what is a good use case. And I think as a team, we can all mention a couple. I know that Mike's doing a lot of work, and ID Ramp's doing a lot of work around single sign-on. So using your credential to get access to other tools. That's a great use case. We're doing a lot of work around how do we get people back to work? And it's PCR tests. How can we create a verifiable credential based on open standards so that everybody here on this panel, their wallet can take this credential? A lab can create a credential. They can have a high assurance level on identity that the individual that's taken this test is attached to this wallet, right? Can attach with biometrics as one option. And then they have this PCR test that they can use to get access to venue, whether it's travel, restaurants, or a sporting event. I don't think the user is going to care whether it's an edge wallet or a cloud wallet. As we get these use cases established, then we can start talking about the pros and cons on an edge, the pros and cons on a cloud, and then the users will just choose which direction they want to go. And it goes back to how I started. It's control. We're building out a platform that the users have control, and they can select what level of control that they would like to have. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Sorry about that.
I agree with everything there. The challenge we have. So the most compelling thing about this technology is is the fact that it simplifies life, right, for people. I can have 10,000 credentials in my wallet, and I don't have to dig through them to find what I'm looking for, right? The verifier tells me, here's what we're looking for. All I have to do is interact with it somehow. I can scan a QR code or whatever that method is. And the intelligence within that wallet is going to figure out what they're looking for and whether I have it or not. It's going to present me the option, right? As RJ was saying, it is about options and control. I have the option to submit that information or not. So I'm part of that process, right? I'm consenting to that transmission of information. And we don't do that today, right? We log in with a password and all this data just flies around everywhere without our control. And that's a problem. That is the fundamental problem that we're fixing here. I think from a technology perspective, no one cares, nor should they have to, right? That's our challenge, to keep driving on open standards, which we as a community do a very good job of so far, right? And incorporating bigger organizations, bigger tech organizations to hopefully follow those same standards, because my mom doesn't care. She doesn't care if I can show her, look, put your Costco card or whatever on your mobile device and it's easier for you, she'll use it. If I can't tell her that, if I can't give her that message, she's not going to use it, and she doesn't care. She doesn't care where it's stored. She doesn't care how it's protected. And that's our job, right? Is to make sure that we provide a safe and secure way to evolve this stuff as the technology becomes more popular. It will become more popular. If for no other reason, then we can finally, after decades, get rid of passwords securely, not mask them, not shield them. We can eliminate them through the same type of technology we've been using for years, doing our online banking, private key encryption. We all now carry around with us the power to do that securely. So for most, of course, there's the edge cases that we have to deal with, but for the most part, we can make the world a better, more safe place. That's really the objective of what we're doing. And every one of us on this panel, that's really what drives us every morning when we get up, to try and build a safer, a more privacy preserving world that's actually easier to interact with. So that's a very rare combination. We never really see that in our industry. Usually when we increase security, we increase complexity. This is a rare case. This technology increases security and simplifies the user interaction, which is why it's inevitable it's going to gain popularity and traction. Our challenge all is just to keep driving on the standards to make sure we're not going in a million different directions.
To build on what Mike said, I want to take this train in one kind of tangent direction, which I think is very interesting. We talk about how can we simplify user interaction, and what is like a direct use case that users will actually care about, this simplifying of user interaction with credentials. One of the cool things, and I want to bring up an open standard that is maybe a slightly technical, but not really. It's called trust frameworks. And I'm not going to go into how they work, but just this kind of really high level concept of trust registries where a user can say, yeah, my company has a bunch of verifiers, whether that is the front door, right as I walk in the front door, whether that is the computer that I sit down at. All of these places are going to ask me for a credential to log in, maybe a key card to get into the front door, a login system to get into my computer, etc. But all of these are managed by my company. And one of the cool things we wallet providers can do is actually enable automatic credential back and forth based on permissions you give to trust frameworks. So this is kind of a really interesting case of open standards that are simplifying user experience, where a user could say, if my company is asking for credentials of this type, right? So specifically, I will choose in my control, my name, my employee number, whatever. And this trust framework, which is my company, is asking for these things. I can just like an Amazon Go store, walk through the front door, go onto my computer, and all of these things automatically talk to each other. They see the permissions that are being exchanged, and I can walk through the front door, log into my computer without ever having to enter any username or password, without having to scan a QR code, just by having that device on me. And so I think that's like a really cool, use case and use of an open standard that enables that kind of thinking.
So I think RJ kind of started touching about just control and giving people the choice. Mike, you started talking about making stuff safer and having privacy enhanced experiences. Dev, your comment about trust frameworks here kind of leads into it's my segue into UX, because ultimately it does impact what the user experience is going to be. I want to throw it back to you, Adrian, and Michael, feel free to chime in afterwards too, having designed a lot of wallets yourself. But I want to start with Adrian, having kind of been behind the Lissi wallet, which is an important open source wallet that is being used by multiple jurisdictions. I think as more and more either governments or private sector are looking to collaborate together to bring these wallets to the mass that could give us privacy and security and control and all these things that we're talking about. When we think about UX, Adrian, and again, with yourself having built wallets for multiple jurisdictions, how do we need to consider jurisdictional and even cultural differences when designing wallets? And again, Michael, feel free to chime in as Adrian's going here.
I think when we talk about the whole topic of the user experience, we need basically what we're designing is a cockpit for the user where he just gets into the car and he drives the car regardless of where he is. Is he in Japan or the UK or in Germany? It might be on the driver's seat on a different side, right? But you still can drive the car because you know how the basics work, and regardless of where you go, it's all the same. Basically, that's the task what we have before us, that regardless where a person comes from, that it can choose whatever wallet more or less, and that they know how to deal with it, so that there is a certain standards and basic interactions which the user is familiar with and can use. So basically, there are three main points in my opinion, which is the safety of the wallet, that the user experience does not allow to do dangerous tasks or dangerous things. It should be friendly, that it's easy to navigate and just looks good, so to speak, and it's simple, that it's not only convenient but also not does take it too much a toll on the user regarding the difficulty of the usage in general. And to be honest, there's quite a lot of topics which we take into consideration when we're building these wallets. For example, the color of the colors are one of the points which we also take into consideration when we talk about jurisdiction, where the different colors can have different meanings, interpretation, different cultures. When we talk about red, this has a wide spectrum of meaning in different cultures. So we have to also be very careful of how we design this kind of user interfaces. And I personally think about these cookies, for example, when we go on websites and there are cookies, most of the time there's the option to customize it or just allow all cookies. And most of the time they actually put like allow all cookies, the big button behind it, so that's the right way of doing it, right? But at the end, it's just the wrong way of doing it. So this is something where we see a user interface used basically the wrong way to put people into the perspective, okay, that's the right way, but it's actually not. And that's the task what we have when we're building these wallets and these user interfaces, that we actually protect our users and not guide them the wrong way by illustrating some choices, maybe more bigger, like the big buttons, or more colorful as others. So that's something which we really need to take into consideration.
Are there any trade-offs, Michael, like when we start talking about privacy and security and stuff like that? How do you look at designing wallet experience with these different elements in mind?
Yeah, I mean, so Adrian and Dev both touched on really important subjects around kind of the user experience of that wallet. I think the ultimate user experience is what Dev described. I go to work, I walk in the front building, and my phone pairs with the access control system. I sit down at my desk and I log onto my computer without having had to worry about a password, right? That seamless, accessible experience is our vision. And we can be kind of stubborn on that vision, but be flexible on how we get there. And when we think about the privacy and security trade-offs, it's going to depend a ton on which use cases we're talking about. If I'm going to present a passport at a border, compared to walking in the front door of my office building. It's going to be a completely different kind of experience because of the security constraints around both of those. I do think for both of those experiences, you have some similarities. The first one is we found, like, for this to really gain adoption, it needs to be performant. We need to have an Apple Pay-like experience for the individual, regardless of where they're presenting their credentials. I think that's a big hurdle for the technologists in the room right now. A lot of the kind of the existing technology we're using does have some performance constraints, and that's something that we're working on as a community together. I think you asked me specifically about security and the privacy, though. Like we have really great tools already built for the security and privacy of our existing mobile devices. I think we can use some of the same UX. For example, Face ID, biometric authentication to the device itself. And then also when we're presenting credentials, there's this whole flow that can take place to bind the individual to that device and the credential as well. But I think it will really have to depend on the use case that we're looking at.
Anything to add, Dev? I know from your perspective as well, you have kind of a certain framework that you look at building wallets around, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I focus on, as Michael said, it's very contextual, right? And within any given context, I always talk about security, privacy, and portability, and the trade-offs between those three. So when we talk about what might be important in one market versus what might be important in another market, or what might be important in one use case versus what might be important in another use case, we have to look at the trade-offs and what we need to prioritize. For example, a wallet that is built for an everyday, in and out, like an IoT device, maybe like a key card or something else, that's not necessarily going to have the same constraints as a user-managed wallet versus a wallet that will have be for a organization or a company. And so when we look at that, we have to talk about security, privacy, and portability. For the end user, I think convenience is the biggest factor, especially in an American market. But that changes when we talk about different markets around the world, where security or privacy might be more of a concern. Yeah.
There's a topic I kind of wanted to touch on with all of you. It was a little further in my agenda, but I would like to step into it now just because there's a question in the chat from Jean Quinn, who asks how a decentralized ID or SSI framework integrates with legacy systems like hotel property management systems, which Adrian makes me think about some ID union work that's happening, or airline global distribution systems in what is sure to be a massive transition to blockchain tech. I think that's quite important, a quite important topic to cover. And again, without getting too much in the weeds, and I know Mike, from your perspective, and even RJ from some of the use cases that you're doing, being able to do parallel rollouts or being able to have self-sovereign identity and wallets and these credentials used in parallel with existing systems is quite important from an adoption story. And so without taking too much of a technical lens, how does that kind of look like when an integration needs to happen, just from an operational perspective, how they work together?
Sure, and that's really our wheelhouse. That's kind of where we're focused, and spend most of our time is trying to understand how we can get our customers using legacy IAM systems, doing legacy federations for service delivery, and really give them a path to using verifiable credentials, most targeted at just eliminating passwords, right? That message is electric right now. You can really gain a lot of customer goodwill just by the promise of eliminating their passwords. And so we, in the IDMRAP platform, have built that any existing directory, any existing integration you have, we can turn into a verifiable credential issuer. And any service you have, no matter how it's federated, OIDC, OAuth, or SAML, we can turn that into a verifier, right? So we can bridge that together and through really zero code, right? Just allow you to plug in those resources issue credentials and eliminate passwords or create a different workflow. The really important thing you mentioned is the migration path, right? Nobody likes a forklift. And the further you get into, especially into enterprise customers, which is kind of our wheelhouse, or was, and now it seems public sector is really ramping up because of all the things that we mentioned previously and RJ was alluding to. But we see a great appetite for a migration, right? An evolution. We need to be able to say, okay, you can still log in with your username and password, but here's another option. And when we roll that out, how do we roll that out? Well, let's pick a group, let's pick a few users, whatever it is, and really tailor that experience to the customer's flow. So without that message, without that evolution message, it's very, very, very difficult to try and affect real change. You have to give the customer a path to get from where they're at today to where they're trying to go. And all of us in the industry do a good job of thinking about that. We're trying to create as simple and easy to use tools to affect that change as possible. And there's all kinds of stuff, as Adrian posted, there's some really good work going on with the OpenID Foundation and making it available for, at the developer level too. So yeah, it's really great work and we're excited to be part of that migration. That's really what is going to be the driver behind this change, is the ability for us to communicate with people that are doing things in certain ways today. We have to be able to give them that path.
Anything to add, RJ?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we go through that same question, they mentioned, travel, and we agree. I think that the password solution is an incredible one, as well as Indicio has already done some open source wallet functionality and agents where they create a happy traveler, a trusted traveler pass that they can use in different pilot or POC type environments. And we were working with them to take, an interoperability step where we're using some of our testing in PCR use cases where we'd issue PCR results, lab results test to the open source wallet, the CETA wallet, and then they would use it in their happy traveler scenario or the trusted travelers so they can get people back traveling and doing tourism. So we are addressing that, trying to address that whole solution about travel and getting back to travel and using these trusted credentials. Because the gotcha is when you're in person, there's a root of trust is I can see you, I can see your identity, I can connect. But how do we do that digitally? And that's what the foundation is for these verifiable credentials, is that rooted trust is based on the blockchain where it's immutable. That if I'm a lab and I can see Matthew and you show me your wallet, right, whether it's through biometrics, through a proof request, I can issue that PCR test. Now, further down the road, when you go to travel, you can use that PCR test with another open source wallet, pass that credential, but that issuer can issue that credential. Now you can get a trusted traveler and travel around different locations. So I agree. I think that's another example of a use case to can really engage users so they can see the value and the power and the ease of use, and really get widespread adoption of verifiable credentials in these wallets.
Fantastic. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions too with people are think about self-sovereign identity and digital wallets being this kind of new wave and doing stuff better without realizing the significant infrastructure that's currently in place inside of, if Mike's talking about the public sector or the private sector too, which there are so many things that these traditional infrastructures do when it comes to managing consent and governance and rules and policies, but being able to really combine verifiable credentials and starting to store stuff more on the edge plays very nicely with what's in there today. So there are a few questions here, and I would like to start going to some of these. Starting with Kai's question, and anyone feel free to jump in here. We all know that we're still in the early days of this technology. We're in the first inning, or whatever analogy we want to use based on where we are in the world. But if we look at, we're starting to see adoption in the private sector. We're starting to see adoption of digital trust frameworks and self-sovereign identity infrastructure at the public sector. What are some of the areas that you think need a little more loving or need a little more research? If someone was gonna, contribute time to forward the whole community in this stuff, what are some areas that you all think that should be researched or improved on more? This is Kai's question. So this is to the group.
If you guys are all right, I'm going to jump at this one really quick, if that's all right. So it's a use case. So the piece we're talking about wallets, but in that trust triangle for verifiable credential, there's two other pieces or two other legs to that stool. You got the issuer and the verifier. So as we need to be able to develop all three of those pieces at the same time, and that's the challenge. And so in order to get to that, I believe it's going to be the use case. So if you can get the right use case, and I think it's going to be in a closed loop ecosystem. So we talked about some of these registries, a large corporation that can be the employees, the holder, and then we're also the corporation's the issuer and the verifier. Now you have all three pieces growing and maturing at the same time. The core technology behind these solutions is there. You have a number of blockchain platforms that are focused on SSI. They work today. We're using them today. They are scalable. We have wallets. I mean, right here, we have 5 wallets where people are talking about the wallets. We all have different verifiers. We're all doing interoperability testing. With a couple folks on this call, I was creating credentials, sent it to their wallet. They were using their issuing to issue to our wallet and our verifiers. We are moving down the field and we're making progress here. Technology's there. The final piece is that use case that everyone could understand and leverage and take advantage of. That's the final piece that I think we're missing.
Yeah, I'll put a finer point from my perspective. The answer to Kai's question is nothing. There's nothing
There we
for
go. Good.
adoption of this technology today, right? And that is also a thing that we, as technologists and people that work on this technology in the background, we need to be careful, and we need to really, when we're communicating to customers, clients, people that would adopt, we love investigating and researching the new tech and all these things that are coming up. There's acronyms every day invented, and it's all important. It's wildly important, and we have to keep driving on it. But if we hope to affect change, if we hope to promote adoption, the answer to that question has to be nothing. There are a billion use cases today where this technology thrives, and it will continue to evolve. And as it evolves, we'll adapt, we'll change, we'll make things better, we'll keep improving. So that's something it really grinds at me, because we do a poor job in our community of separating public message from internal dev, continuing product development, and we try to be very clear in that message. There's absolutely nothing holding back the adoption of this technology today. It's there, it's ready, as RJ said, it's fully baked, ready to go. And we have customers adopting. I know everyone on this panel has customers adopting the technology today. Will we keep making it better? Absolutely. But there's no reason, there's nothing that we're waiting on. There's no magic that still has to be baked before we can start using this in certain use cases.
Maybe adding on that, the use case is obviously super important. I think when we go deeper in that, what we need to do is do the mapping of the customer journey to really see what are the pain points, what are the different steps and phases within the use case, in order to really see the red line which the user needs to follow. And oftentimes there are still some steps or some issues in there where the user flow stops, or where the user is confused and doesn't know what's next. So I think that's something really important, and it highly depends on the use case, because these are very different, and you need to take a look on an individual basis. However, I would say that we're still not 100% there, that there are all topics solved, because something, for example, like guardianship, we still struggle to have really a good solution for that. So there's still plenty of topics where we need to deep dive in and find further solutions to really have a mainstream adoption. I would say we're not there yet.
Dev, Michael, if just shift a little bit, we have just under 10 minutes left. we've been talking a little bit about use cases to do with getting people back to work and travel and identity and access management. What are some of the really cool use cases that either of you are working on now, or are excited about, or have seen over the past little while, just to inspire the audience here?
Sure, I can take this first. Kind of at a high level rather than a specific use case, one of the things that like we're interested at in Global ID is the chicken and egg problem with issuers and verifiers, which was, how do you get more issuers versus how do you get more verifiers? Well, issuers only want to issue if they're verifiers, and verifiers only want to verify credentials if they're issuers' credentials. One of the really cool things that we've been working on are community-based credentials. So while you have these big institutions and you have all of these passports and driver's license, et cetera, one of the interesting things that we've been working on is hobbyist credentials. For example, if you have communities of wine lovers in Chicago or San Francisco, and those communities want to interact with each other and give accreditation and credentialing based on these hobbyist models. I think that's kind of a really cool use case because that kind of breaks out of the mold of the traditional way we talk about self-sovereign identity, which is generally, oh, you have a passport or you have a driver's license, and talks a little bit more about how everyday users might actually give accreditation to each other and build reputation with each other.
Yeah, just to add on to what Dev said, it's been really enjoyable to be working on the technology in this space, because we're providing the tools for tons of different scenarios take place. And when we talk to customers, we have people working on just such a wide variety of use cases that I would have never thought of myself. And I think a lot of us here can kind of see that. And particularly, I mean, the obvious one that has happened over the last year and a half is all around the COVID pandemic. So both vaccinations and also PCR tests have been able to be issued and also verified using verifiable credentials. I'd say though kind of three big ecosystems that Trinsic at least has seen grow on our tools is supply chain. And there's a lot of credentialing that goes on in supply chain that also has to deal with some public sector. We've also seen banking and finance, and then finally healthcare. And all three of those are hugely regulated industries that have a lot of friction for individuals and also for businesses. I think if we look at ecosystems that have a lot of friction in existing exchanges of data, we're going to see an industry that's ripe for verifiable credentials.
Is looking at adoption from a government intervention or regulation lens, do you think that's going to speed up or slow the adoption of digital wallets and self-sovereign identity? And the example here is that online gaming has far less regulation than healthcare, for example. Are these things that the group here that you all think about when you're looking for paths towards adoption of these technologies?
So I have an answer to this, but my answer is a little bit of a tangent that goes into the dream world, right? The 5-year, 10-year down the line. So the short answer that I think for that question is, I personally think that if we look at government regulation as a signal for verifiable credentials, that's generally a slower path. But that's more of a US-centric viewpoint. If we look outside of the US, there's plenty of countries that are very, like Estonia, Canada, et cetera, that are very, gung-ho about verifiable credentials and are moving faster on those paths. But I think one of the really cool aspects of verifiable credentials is adding signals that don't require government regulation. And so one of the use cases that I often talk about in the US is credit reporting agencies. In the US, there are 3 government mandated credit reporting agencies. What would it take for a fourth government, credit reporting agency to actually exist without it being a government mandated signal? What that means is, for example, could Stripe get into the game and say, we actually want to report on a user's credit. And actually, instead of it being a centralized repository like we have on the existing credit reporting agencies, we're actually going to give the user their own credential, and then they can use that for financial transactions as they see fit. To add that signal requires a little bit of government regulation, but also maybe not, because maybe a verifier can just say, we're going to accept this new signal because this signal does not require Stripe to actually consolidate any data, and they can sidestep this regulation. So interesting cases where you can sidestep that regulation and give users more control of their data directly, I think is an interesting aspect where we can push verifiable credentials.
Anything to add here from just based on looking, and I think Lynn did write a question, Lynn from Indicio, who I work with closely in the Trust Over IP, which is folks on the call that may not be in the Trust Over IP Foundation and looking for a place to contribute to developing frameworks and governance that is going to help with the adoption of digital wallets like we're talking about today. Please check it out. Lynn kind of asked the question about inclusivity, and this for me kind of relates to the same use case, like or the same topic of just saying, like, what are there's so many different opportunities for different types of credentials. We often talk about just government issued credentials like a driver's license or a health card, and of course that's the area that governments throughout the world are going to start in, but there's so many opportunities to give a supply of credentials to people that really creates accessibility and inclusivity options. So this is an area I'm quite excited in, and I'm sure excites the group here as well. Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left. If there's anything that any of the panelists here felt like we didn't cover, or one of you would like to finish on a specific topic, feel free to jump in. We do have 2 minutes left.
There's one more topic I would like to mention. I think what is really important for people, because like we have new processes which the users might not be familiar with, and I think it's very important that we give them the option to like try it out first, to experiment with it without being able to damage anything. And I think that's really where their demonstrations come into place. So I think really that's something really important, that we offer that to our users so they can get a feel for it, and without registering anywhere or whatsoever, they can just see what it is like to get through the process and think, okay, that's easier than I thought, and then actually they're gonna use it because they know how these processes work. They feel that they've done it already and be familiar with it before they actually, for example, load their government ID into the wallet or whatsoever. So I think that's something which we are, as a community, really need to provide.
Definitely. I definitely think, especially if it's a C-suite or whatever decision-making person, it's easier to have them make a decision if you put something in their hands rather than trying to explain all of these concepts to them. So we're pretty much at the hour here. I'll just throw it back over to Maya just to close this meetup. And again, from myself and the panelists here, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion here on wallets. Hope to do these types of things again with the group, but I'll just throw it over to Maya from Indicio to close this.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you everyone for coming. It was an amazing discussion. I'd like to do this again in the future, and I hope everyone enjoyed.
Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. To stay up to speed with future episodes, or to catch up on ones you may have missed, make sure to check out the SSI Orbit podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, or wish to see someone in particular on a future episode, you can find me by searching Metzer Glode on LinkedIn or Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me directly and I'll get back to you. See you all next time.